joining me for a coffee with the editor. You've had a productive and busy morning. So the state of safety was released this morning. Obviously, there's some key highlights. A lot of it has to do with security, vandalism, theft of infrastructure. What were the other key points that have you quite concerned?
Thanks, Philippa, for the opportunity. I think, as you rightly state, my concerns really are around security and the effectiveness of the current arrangements in terms of making sure that we manage that particular aspect. But in fact, if you looked into the security statistics, you'd also see that while vandalism or theft of assets is actually maybe the key driver of the increase, or maybe the one that accounts for most of those security incidents, we do have people's safety as an issue, and that actually encompasses robberies, people being attacked, assaults, and all of that. So when you look at the category for fatalities and injuries, people's safety actually accounts for a lot more. And because of that, I do think that I know that maybe even in the discussion, I may have placed a lot of emphasis on assets and infrastructure. But I think personal safety outside, around stations, is an area that we should not forget. In fact, one of the things we are considering we're trying to do is to actually get those statistics broken down by gender, so that we also understand who's most affected within that category. And remember, if we're trying to attract people back to rail, that is one area we're going to have to look at. From an RSR perspective, because safety has been an issue for quite a few years, we are conducting some research in the current financial year so that we get a better understanding of personal security and aspects of that, so that we are able to come up with the correct mitigation. So again, security continues to play a major role for me. Then with respect to operational safety occurrences, I think, as you see, that we do have an increase in the category of people traveling outside designated passenger areas. So that's mainly around the station precinct, or where they're closer to stations. So this talks directly to how people actually access the station.
Yeah.
And I think when you think of an operator like PRASA, whom is struggling financially, but also that means there's a lot of room there. If you consider that this is how people access the stations and the platforms, it means there's a lot of room for fare evasion.
Yes.
So there's an area that I think they need to. I know that fare evasion necessarily isn't something within the RSR's mandate, but I do think that, when you look at the entire system and you identify the key components of why there is failure, it's obviously the issue of the financial stability of PRASA and its ability to collect as much revenue as possible, so that we are also able to carry out maintenance and those sort of things, which obviously eventually would affect safety.
Yes.
So you'd see, in terms of fatalities in that environment, we've got about 11% increase, as well as in injuries, which is about 38%. So that really is a concern for us. People struck by trains remains a concern, has always been, because we all know that the likelihood of survival is very minimal. And also this has, in a way, maybe indirectly, would touch on communities who aren't necessarily rail users, but not indirectly. It touches on it directly.
Yeah.
But it actually means that a whole host of people who are living alongside the network lines within the rail reserve aren't protected sufficiently. So what we are looking to do in that instance is the minister has finally published the regulations on railway reserves, which actually puts an obligation on operators to maintain and protect their railway reserves, but also it almost requires their intervention or at least a partnership with municipalities when they do consider human settlement, where they're located, and the vicinity around their reserve, and ensuring that we keep that protected so that we don't have this encroachment into the railway space.
So obviously the State of Safety report looks at 2019-2020 is a report up to the point before we actually shut down for COVID. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure what your stats are going to be for 2020-21. It's going to be a very different picture.
Look, it is going to be a different picture purely because for about an entire quarter, you actually have not had any movement on the railways, particularly within the passenger side. Mm-hmm. So you're likely to see Transnet, but even there, remember, it was reduced. I think during level 5, not everyone was operating huge congestion. And obviously 4 and 3, where we started getting new traffic coming in. Yeah. So my expectation is that from a passenger rail service point of view, you may not see a lot, but also what we have done, or what PRASA has done, let me not claim victories that don't belong to me. PRASA has really done in trying to, in the reinstatement of the service, is not to reinstate the entire service. Of course, in part, it is as a result of the vandalism that took place, the inability to maintain during periods of the COVID, the lockdowns. So they've been opening it corridor by corridor, so they're scaling up as they gain capacity to do that. And I still maintain that it provides an opportunity to build a network that provides much improved levels of service going forward, as opposed to what we've had. And I think it also allows the PRASA team to almost learn lessons as they build up slowly. Of course, we had said as the regulator, when certain things are not in place, particularly security, protection of assets, if that's not in place, we wouldn't support an opening of a section. So they've almost had to sort of scale up. And I think the maybe the advantage of being able to do that is that you can increase your service offerings in line with the capacity or your resources in that case. So I am keeping a keen eye on that to see what's happening as they improve. We did get reports about overcrowding. Our inspectors are sort of looking at that and at ensuring that we don't go back to the old habits where our trains are just overcrowded, which leads to all other security risks. Yes, I think post-COVID, even in terms of what you may see, though, is an increase in the security environment, particularly theft of assets, because we did see that a whole host of assets were removed from PRASA, rail tracks, overhead. I'm sure you're aware, a lot of, in some sections, we don't even have overhead wires. In fact, PRASA is deploying diesel locos. So it is as a result of the theft. So I anticipate that would actually show a significant growth. But obviously the statistics will tell us once we have analyzed it.
Absolutely. All right. So now we're going to get to my favorite topic. And it doesn't really have much to do with what you released today in terms of your state of safety report, but will have an impact. How are you viewing the potential of open access and concessions for both freight and passenger, and the rail safety's role? I think that's a big step for you guys. And what are your views and opinions on this?
I should have known that you'll do this, but it's okay. As the regulator, we obviously encourage that. We are, and I see a whole host of operators are actually looking forward to that particular issue. While most of the issues that will play out are mainly around economic regulation, which is outside the RSR's mandate. But from a safety perspective, we have been doing some work based on, I think in the past we had been approached by operators on trying to work out what then becomes a proper arrangement between the network owner and those that operate on that. So we spent quite a bit of time last year in anticipation of this, looking at the interface agreement framework, which I think would then allow, which in our view, it allows both the network owner as well as the operator or the train operator to have an agreement and to have clear agreement and an understanding of who carries what responsibility. Because I think that's probably one of the major risks from a safety perspective is obviously there are issues around economic regulation, but I think for us it would be being very clear about who has the responsibility for safety within that environment and having very clear agreements between mainly the network operator and the train operators in terms of responsibility, if I could call it that way.
And then obviously the main oversight then comes from the Railway Safety Regulator.
Yes, the main oversight for the interface agreement would come from the Railway Safety Regulator. Look, Philippa, it is something that's already in existence, but we saw an opportunity to improve that so that in anticipation of an increased number of sort of private operators or third parties within the network, and hence we started working on the framework. We've been doing an audit to see the nature of the current agreements, interface agreements, just from a safety perspective, and trying to identify areas of improvement. We are also obviously looking at, from a safety management point of view, maturity. We've been doing quite a bit of work on maturity assessment so that we also understand the maturity of the various operators in terms of managing safety. And I think that would obviously play a key role going forward once you have as many players in the system and in terms of the levels of maturity of the various operators, because that would affect how you manage safety. But my sense is that you find that a lot of the responsibility still lies on the network operator, and I would anticipate that they somehow sort of try and transfer that towards their tariffs or something along those lines in terms of responsibility. But as I say, because it's not within the RSR's mandate, so our key focus is really on the interface agreements.
I think it's very exciting.
I mean, it is an exciting prospect. It is something that we would welcome. I think as the regulator, we are really looking forward to that. But key is that we are prepared once that happens and we do not become a stumbling block in the process of development. I think that's very important for me in ensuring that we understand the landscape and we are able to put in place the necessary measures to manage safety in that context.
What were the other things that came out of the report that have you concerned? Because the other stuff that was reported like this morning, they're pretty much no-brainers because we've been reporting on it for like some time now in terms of the security things. But obviously the big question, without a doubt, I mean, everybody's going, yes, you put your safety stuff out. Let's get to the real stuff. And the real stuff is open access and the role that you guys are going to play.
That certainly is, our major role really would be in ensuring that there is clear responsibility lines for who's responsible for safety in order to ensure that that risk is mitigated. Because we do expect an increased risk with that, with other people operating. Remember, for Transnet has a lot of control over most of the network at this stage. So the more players are there, I think it is important that the rules of engagement from a safety point of view are very clear to all parties.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where we're at, Philippa, and thank you very much for covering us.
Always.
This one, and we're always open to whatever discussions you'd want to have with us.
Well, I'm planning a few. But you know me.
I know. No, we'll be available.
All
Very
right.
much appreciate the opportunity.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time, as always.